Hey everyone, Matt here with another episode of Inspired By, the series where Yugs and myself take concepts from video games, movies, comic books, anime, and other media and recreate them in the Unreal Engine. This episode, I'm recreating the Ghost of Tsushima standoff mechanic, where you face off against a single person in a sort of duel of bluffing. The enemy will sometimes bluff and do feint attacks, or they may slash you to kill. It's up to the player to be able to read certain tells to determine when to swing their blade. Doing so at the right time leads to an instant kill. Misfiring could be fatal. Let's dive right in to see how I created this in Unreal. To start off, I grabbed some animations from Mixamo. This time I needed a good assortment of clips for the character drawing their sword, slashing, and sheathing their sword. And what would a good sword fight be without a good death animation? For the fake out attack, I took the normal attack animation and cut it off at a point where I thought the player would be able to tell whether an attack would be genuine or not. This is vital to make it easy to attack prematurely while allowing it to be fair if the player is paying attention. In order to determine which animation to play, I have an integer state used for the standoff that increments as things progress. While I didn't fully implement this functionality, it would have easily given me the ability to have follow-ups to the standoff, like in Ghost of Tsushima, where people will run at you after the initial standoff. For the player, I have the player press and hold the attack button, which is E on the keyboard, to get them to enter the standoff cycle in the animation blueprint. When the player releases the attack button, the character slashes. On the other hand, the AI has a lot of similar states, but I have it using different animations and also have a few extra states that the player doesn't need that have to do with the feint attacks. When the AI is picking an action, it randomly picks between the slash and the feint attack using different integer values for the standoff state. When it's done with the feint attack, it switches to a standard holding sword animation so they can get ready for the next action. I also have the AI check to see if the player has swung their sword. If they have, then the AI will automatically attack back. In both situations, I used animation notify events which trickle back to the character blueprint to determine what to do next once animations are complete, or once things happen during an animation. This also allowed me to have the drawing and sheathing animations change the sword between being attached to the character's hip and hand somewhat realistically. With the basics of the player and AI sorted, it was on to polish. Probably the most important part was to try to achieve the cinematic feel. The first part of this includes the horizontal bars at the top and bottom, which I achieved by just moving some black images up and down in the UI. Admittedly, this may not be as proper as letterboxing, but hey, this works. For walking up after initiating a standoff, I calculate teleport and final locations based on the direction from the player's character to the target character and the desired distance from the target character. Initially, I have the player character walk to the teleport location while using a level sequence to fade the screen to black and back. In the middle of the fade, using sequencer events, I instruct the player character to teleport to the teleport location and continue its walk to the final location. The final location of the player had to be rather deliberate, as the distance is vital to achieve proper gameplay for the standoff. After all, I didn't want the player to be able to slash the enemy without waiting until the enemy started an actual attack. When calculating these locations, I also had to factor in that the player and enemy may be at different heights. I did that by raycasting downward from a certain distance above the teleport and final locations to determine the ground height. Next up are the slash and blood splatter effects. I added a socket to the end of the sword, which I used to determine where to add the effects. The blood splatter was a modified directional burst Niagara emitter that displays red spheres. The slash effect was based on the static beam emitter template, which I rotate to match the direction the sword is going based off of the previous and current locations of the socket at the end of the sword. For a bit of an added effect to make the sword slashes feel more powerful, I added slow motion to once the sword makes contact with an enemy, which goes away partway through the death animation. Using all of this, I think it accomplishes a nice cinematic feel. Finally, I added the Katana TT model by TuanTran34 on Sketchfab and used the Meadow environment set by NatureManufacture as my final test stage. Links to those can be found in the description below. There were a couple things I wish I had time to complete, such as adding in the field of view change over time that Ghost of Tsushima has during standoffs, as well as adding in the enemy units charging at the player after the initial standoff is complete, but I was still satisfied with this end result. Let's take a look at the test stage I used to see the final product. Thanks for watching this episode of Inspired By. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give the video a like as well as hit the subscribe button and bell icon to receive notifications when we post new videos. We'd also appreciate it if you followed us on our Twitter account @noble_phantom, which you can find linked out in the description below. Until next time, stay safe. See you next video.